The night my father told me I had destroyed the Carter family name, my mother didn't defend me, my sister stared at her plate in silence, and I walked out believing I'd never come back. The Carter family lived in one of those wealthy Chicago suburbs where every lawn looked professionally trimmed and every Christmas card felt like a political campaign poster. My parents loved appearances more than honesty. They cared about country club memberships, dinner parties, and which neighbors drove new luxury SUVs every year. Growing up, I learned very quickly that image was everything in our house. My younger sister Sophia fit perfectly into that world. She graduated from Northwestern with honors, worked in corporate marketing downtown, and somehow always looked polished even buying coffee on a Saturday morning. Meanwhile, I was the disappointment. I was 29 years old, single, renting a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Chicago, and trying to keep my struggling branding agency alive with freelance clients who constantly paid late. To my parents, that wasn't entrepreneurship. It was embarrassment. That Friday night dinner started tense before I even sat down. My father poured himself a glass of wine without asking if anyone else wanted one, which usually meant he was already irritated. My mother kept adjusting the napkins like she was preparing for a magazine photo shoot instead of dinner with her daughters. Sophia barely looked up from her phone. "So," my father finally said, cutting into his steak, "when are you going back to a real job?" I already knew where this was going. "I have a real job," I answered calmly. "Running a business isn't pretending." He laughed under his breath. That little laugh always irritated me more than yelling. "Emily, your business barely survives month to month." My mother jumped in immediately. "Your aunt asked what you do now, and honestly, I didn't know what to tell her." "You could tell her the truth," I said. "That I own a branding agency." "A tiny agency working out of an apartment," my father replied. "You walked away from a six-figure career for this." Sophia stayed silent, which somehow hurt worse than if she agreed with them. She used to defend me when we were kids. Back then, she'd sneak into my room after our parents fought with me and leave candy bars on my desk like peace offerings. But adulthood changed her. Or maybe surviving our family required becoming quiet. "I'm happier now," I said. My father shook his head immediately. "No, you're stubborn now. There's a difference." My mother folded her hands together. "People notice these things, Emily. The Carter family has a reputation." I stared at her for a second because I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A reputation?" "Yes," my father snapped. "And frankly, you've damaged it." The room went completely silent after that. Even Sophia looked up. My chest tightened, but I refused to cry in front of them. That would only make me look weak. "So that's what this is about?" I asked quietly. "You're embarrassed by me?" "We're embarrassed by your choices," my father corrected. "You had every opportunity handed to you and threw it away chasing some fantasy startup life." My mother sighed dramatically. "We just don't understand why you insist on making life harder for yourself." I looked around the dining room at the expensive chandelier, the imported wine, the perfect family photos hanging on the wall, and suddenly everything felt fake. Every smile in those pictures looked rehearsed. Every holiday memory suddenly felt staged for approval from strangers. Then my father said the sentence that finally broke something inside me. "You ruined the Carter family image." Sophia whispered, "Dad." But he ignored her. I slowly pushed my chair back from the table. "You know what's funny?" I said, grabbing my coat. "You care more about what your neighbors think than whether your daughter is actually happy." My mother looked horrified. "Don't be dramatic." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it anymore. "That's the problem. None of this is real to you." Sophia stood up like she wanted to stop me, but she didn't move. She just watched me walk toward the front door, while my father stayed seated at the table like he'd won some kind of argument. Outside, the cold Chicago air hit my face hard enough to sting. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel for almost a full minute before starting the engine. My phone buzzed once. For half a second, I thought maybe Sophia had texted me. Maybe she was finally going to say something. But it was only a payment reminder from my internet provider warning me my bill was overdue. I laughed again, this time at myself. Because according to my family, I was the failure. And somehow, sitting alone in my 10-year-old Honda with $73 in my checking account, I still felt more honest than anyone back inside that house. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from my mother, one text from my father that simply said, "You owe us an apology," and nothing from Sophia. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. My apartment looked even smaller in the daylight. The radiator made clanking noises every few minutes, the kitchen sink leaked slowly into a bowl underneath the pipes, and my desk was covered with unpaid invoices and half-finished client proposals. I made coffee using the cheapest grounds I could find at Target and opened my laptop, already dreading what the day would bring. Running a small agency sounded exciting when people described it online. In reality, it meant chasing clients for payments, answering emails at midnight, and pretending confidence even when your bank account terrified you. My agency, Carter Creative, only had 2 steady clients left. One was a local fitness studio that constantly changed its mind about branding colors, and the other was a family-owned bakery that paid me mostly in pastries whenever business slowed down. I checked my business account balance twice because I thought the number had to be wrong. It was not. After rent, utilities, and software subscriptions, I had less than enough to survive the month comfortably. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in months, I started wondering if my father had been right. Maybe I had thrown away stability chasing pride. Maybe I should have stayed in corporate marketing downtown wearing expensive blazers and pretending PowerPoint presentations mattered. At least then my parents would still answer my calls like I was worth something. My phone rang again. This time it was my landlord. "Emily, I just wanted to remind you rent is due Monday." "I know," I said quickly. "You will have it." "All right. I just needed to check." The call lasted less than 30 seconds, but my anxiety stayed for another hour. Around noon, I forced myself to leave the apartment and walk to a small coffee shop 3 blocks away because sitting alone with my thoughts was becoming unbearable. Chicago in February always looked exhausted. Gray skies, dirty snow piled against sidewalks, people rushing everywhere with their heads down like happiness cost extra. I ordered the cheapest coffee on the menu and opened my laptop again. Rejection emails filled my inbox. One potential client had decided to move in another direction. Another said my agency was too small for current needs. I almost laughed reading that one because small had followed me my entire life. Small agency, small apartment, small future. Meanwhile, Sophia probably sat in some beautiful downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows and catered lunches. I imagined my parents bragging about her at dinner parties while conveniently avoiding conversations about me entirely. Then an email notification popped up from someone named Daniel Mercer. I almost ignored it because I did not recognize the name, but the subject line caught my attention immediately. Referral from Jenna at Northside Fitness. I opened it fast. Daniel introduced himself as the co-founder of a small tech startup, developing productivity software for remote teams. He said Jenna from the fitness studio had recommended my branding work and suggested we schedule a call. My first instinct was skepticism. Startups contacted me all the time wanting premium work for impossible budgets. But at the bottom of the email, Daniel included one sentence that stopped me cold. "We are looking for a long-term branding partner before our national launch this summer." National launch? I reread those words 3 times. My hands actually shook slightly while typing my response because I needed this opportunity more than I wanted to admit. We scheduled a video meeting for the next morning. That night I barely slept. I spent hours researching the company, rewriting pitch notes, and adjusting presentation slides that probably looked fine already. Around midnight, my phone buzzed unexpectedly. For half a second, I thought it might finally be Sophia. Instead, it was my mother sending a photo from some charity dinner they attended that evening. Sophia stood beside them wearing a dark green dress, smiling perfectly for the camera. My mother added the caption, "Your sister understands professionalism." I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone. Then I noticed something strange in the picture. Sophia's smile did not reach her eyes. Most people would never notice it because she had spent years mastering the Carter family performance. But I knew my sister better than anyone. And for the first time in years, Sophia looked tired. The next morning, I treated the video meeting like it was the most important interview of my life because honestly, it probably was. I woke up before sunrise, cleaned my apartment background carefully so nobody on the call would notice the cracked wall near my kitchen, and changed outfits 3 times before settling on a black blazer I had not worn since leaving corporate life. At exactly 9 o'clock, the call started. Daniel Mercer looked younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, wearing a hoodie instead of a suit. Beside him sat his business partner, a sharp-looking woman named Priya Shah who barely smiled during introductions. I immediately assumed she hated me. "Thanks for meeting with us," Daniel said. "We checked out your portfolio. Jenna spoke very highly of you." "I appreciate that," I answered, trying not to sound nervous. Priya leaned forward slightly. "We are rebranding before launch. New visuals, messaging, social strategy, everything. We need someone who understands emotional connection, not just clean graphics." I nodded immediately because for the first time in weeks someone was speaking my language. Most clients wanted logos. The smart ones wanted identity. For the next 40 minutes we talked through their product, target audience, competitors, and long-term vision. Slowly, the conversation stopped feeling like an interview and started feeling natural. Ideas came quickly. I explained how their branding felt too cold and corporate for remote workers already exhausted by digital life. I talked about trust, simplicity, and emotional clarity. Daniel actually started taking notes while I spoke. Priya finally smiled once when I described their current website as emotionally unavailable. By the end of the call, Daniel looked energized. "This is exactly what we have been missing," he said. "Most agencies just throw trendy designs at us." I tried not to look too hopeful. "Well, I would love to work together." Priya glanced toward Daniel before speaking carefully. "We are still meeting 2 larger agencies this week." Of course they were. Companies like theirs always preferred bigger firms with polished offices and impressive client lists. My stomach tightened immediately. Then Daniel surprised me. "Honestly, I think we already found our fit." I blinked. "Wait, seriously?" He laughed. "You understand the product better than people who have been studying it for months." Priya nodded slowly. "We want a proposal by Friday." The second the call ended, I sat frozen at my desk staring at the screen. Then I covered my face with both hands because I could actually feel tears building. Not sadness. Relief. Real relief for the first time in months. I still had no guarantee they would hire me, but suddenly survival no longer felt impossible. I spent the entire week working harder than I ever had before. I built branding mock-ups until 2 in the morning, rewrote taglines during train rides, and drank enough coffee to make my hands shake constantly. Days blurred together. But for once, exhaustion felt purposeful instead of hopeless. On Thursday night, my phone rang unexpectedly while I adjusted presentation slides. Sophia's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it in disbelief because my sister almost never called me directly anymore. For a second, I considered ignoring it. Then I answered. "Hey," I said cautiously. There was silence for a moment before she finally spoke. "Mom is furious you have not apologized." I laughed quietly. "That sounds about right." Another pause. Then her voice softened slightly. "Dad should not have said that to you." The words caught me completely off guard. Sophia never criticized our parents openly. Ever. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked carefully. She hesitated again. "Because he was wrong." Before I could respond, I heard another voice faintly in the background. A man. Probably her fiancé, Ethan. Sophia immediately lowered her voice. "I have to go." "Sophia," I said quickly. "Are you okay?" She took too long to answer. "Yeah," she finally whispered. "I am just tired." Then the call ended. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that family is never as perfect as it looks, do not forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below telling us your thoughts. And if you love emotional family stories filled with real struggles, healing, and powerful life lessons, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Friday morning felt strangely quiet, like the city itself was holding its breath with me. I arrived at a co-working office downtown almost an hour early because I could not focus inside my apartment anymore. Carter Creative technically existed as a registered agency, but most days it still felt like me pretending to be a company while answering emails beside a leaking kitchen sink. The co-working space smelled like expensive coffee and ambition. Young founders sat in glass meeting rooms talking loudly about investments and scaling strategies, while I nervously adjusted my presentation one final time. At 11:15, Daniel emailed me asking if I could jump on a quick call sooner than expected. My stomach dropped immediately. In my experience, quick calls usually meant rejection delivered politely. I found an empty conference room, connected my laptop and answered. Daniel appeared smiling before the camera even fully loaded. "Good news," he said immediately. "We want to move forward." For a second I honestly thought I misheard him. "Wait. Seriously?" Priya appeared beside him holding printed copies of my proposal. "We reviewed everything this morning. Your strategy is stronger than the agency's, charging triple your rate." Daniel grinned. "So congratulations. Carter Creative officially has its biggest client." I covered my mouth with one hand because I could physically feel months of stress leaving my body all at once. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Seriously, you have no idea what this means to me." "Actually," Priya said, "I think we do." Over the next 2 weeks my life became absolute chaos. The good kind. Daniel and Priya moved fast, which meant I had to move faster. Suddenly I was handling branding revisions, campaign strategy, launch schedules, investor presentation visuals, and social media planning almost nonstop. I upgraded from working at my tiny kitchen table to spending every day at the co-working office downtown, because clients finally needed professional meeting spaces. For the first time since starting the agency, I stopped checking my bank account in fear every morning. Then the campaign launched, and everything changed. The startup's rebrand exploded online almost overnight. Their launch video hit hundreds of thousands of views across social media platforms during the first weekend alone. Tech blogs started covering the company. Influencers shared screenshots of the new interface. One marketing account on Instagram called the campaign the most emotionally intelligent startup branding of the year. Daniel sent me that post at 2 in the morning with 6 exclamation marks. By Monday, my inbox looked completely different. New inquiries poured in constantly. Small businesses, restaurants, another startup from Austin, a clothing company from Seattle. For the first time in my career, people were not asking why my agency was small. They were asking if I had availability. I hired my first part-time designer 2 weeks later, then a freelance copywriter. Carter Creative finally started feeling real. One afternoon, while reviewing concepts with my new team, my phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket. I ignored it until the meeting ended. 5 missed calls from my mother. 1 text from my father. "We saw your campaign online." That was it. No congratulations. No pride. Just acknowledgement like they were commenting on weather. 10 minutes later, another message arrived from my mother. "Your aunt forwarded us an article about your company." My company. Not your little hobby anymore. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. A younger version of me would have felt desperate for their approval. But something had shifted recently. Success had not magically healed the years of criticism, but it made me realize how conditional their support always was. They respected outcomes, not effort. Image, not struggle. Sophia still stayed mostly silent through all of it. Occasionally she liked one of Carter Creative's posts online, but that was the extent of our communication. Still, I kept thinking about that phone call, and the exhaustion in her voice. One Thursday evening, almost a month after the launch, I attended a networking event downtown with Daniel and Priya. The rooftop venue overlooked the Chicago skyline, glowing gold against the lake. Everyone there looked successful in that polished city way my parents always admired. Expensive coats, perfect smiles, conversations about investments and acquisitions floating through the air like background music. At one point, I stepped away from the crowd to grab another drink when I heard someone say my name behind me. "Emily." I turned around in shock. Sophia stood near the elevator wearing a navy blue dress and heels, but she looked nothing like the confident younger sister I remembered. She looked thinner, tired. Her makeup covered most of it, but not completely. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She gave a weak smile. "Corporate event. My company sponsored part of this." For a moment, neither of us spoke. It suddenly felt strange standing there together after months of distance and years of pretending everything between us was normal. Then she glanced around the rooftop carefully before lowering her voice. "I saw your campaign numbers." "Oh, it was really good, Emily." Hearing genuine admiration from her felt strangely emotional because compliments did not exist much in our family, unless they benefited someone. "Thanks," I answered softly. She nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the crowded room behind us like she wanted to disappear. "I should get back." "Sophia." She stopped walking. "Are you happy?" The question seemed to hit her harder than I expected. She looked down immediately, twisting the ring on her finger slowly. "Does it matter?" she asked quietly. Before I could answer, a tall man approached us from across the rooftop. Expensive suit, perfect hair, controlled smile. "Ethan." Her fiancé. "There you are," he said to Sophia before finally acknowledging me with a polite nod. "Emily." His tone made my name sound like an inconvenience. Sophia straightened instantly beside him almost automatically. "We should go," she said quickly. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, but the gesture felt performative instead of affectionate. "Good seeing you," he said to me. Then they walked away together into the crowd. Sophia never looked back. But right before the elevator doors closed behind them, I caught one last expression on her face. She did not look successful. She looked trapped. Over the next 3 months, my life moved faster than I could process. Carter Creative outgrew the co-working office and moved into a small studio space near Fulton Market with exposed brick walls and giant windows overlooking downtown Chicago. I hired 3 full-time employees, signed contracts with 2 new startups, and spent more time in client meetings than inside my own apartment. Some mornings I caught myself smiling during train rides for absolutely no reason because for the first time in years, my future no longer felt fragile. But success came with strange side effects. People who ignored me suddenly remembered I existed. Former coworkers who barely responded to emails now wanted coffee meetings. Distant relatives started commenting under my social media posts about how proud they always were of me. Even my parents changed. Not emotionally, just publicly. My mother began sharing articles about Carter Creative online like she had supported me from the beginning. My father mentioned my company during golf outings according to my uncle, who found the whole thing amusing. "Funny how your business became respectable once money got involved," he told me during a phone call. He was right, but Sophia remained distant. Occasionally she texted short congratulations after major milestones, but the warmth between us still felt cautious, like neither of us fully trusted it yet. Then one Tuesday afternoon in early October, everything shifted again. I was reviewing ad concepts with my design team when my phone vibrated across the conference table. "Sophia." I excused myself immediately and answered in the hallway. "Hey," I said. Her voice sounded strange. Flat. Exhausted. "Are you busy?" "Not really." "What happened?" She went quiet for a second before finally saying, "Ethan moved out." I leaned against the wall slowly. "Wait. What?" "This morning." Her breathing sounded uneven, like she had been crying earlier and was trying hard to hide it. "Apparently he has been seeing someone else for months." Anger hit me instantly, stronger than expected. I had never liked Ethan, but hearing the damage in Sophia's voice made something protective wake up inside me. "Sophia, where are you?" "At the condo." "Do you want me to come over?" Another silence. Then quietly, "Yes." 40 minutes later, I stood outside her high-rise building downtown carrying takeout and 2 overpriced coffees she probably would not drink. When Sophia opened the door, I barely recognized her. She wore sweatpants instead of designer clothes. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes looked swollen from crying. For the first time in maybe her entire adult life, she looked completely unfiltered, completely human. She tried smiling when she saw me, but it collapsed almost immediately. "You brought food," she whispered. Of course I brought food. That finally made her laugh once. A small laugh, but real. The condo looked strangely empty without Ethan's things. Expensive furniture still filled every room, but the place felt cold now, like a staged apartment no one actually lived in. Sophia sat curled on the couch while I unpacked containers onto the kitchen counter. "How long did you know?" I asked carefully. She stared down at her coffee. "About a week." "And Mom and Dad?" Her expression changed immediately. Bitter. "Mom asked if we could postpone telling people until after the charity gala next month." I blinked in disbelief. "You are kidding." "No," Sophia laughed quietly. but there was no humor in it. Dad said relationships are complicated, and that public embarrassment makes everything harder. I sat beside her slowly. Sophia, she interrupted me before I could continue. Do you know what the worst part is? Her eyes filled again. I was more afraid of disappointing them than losing him. That sentence stayed in the room between us for several seconds because I understood exactly what she meant. Growing up in our family meant learning that appearances mattered more than emotions. We were trained to perform success before we even understood happiness. Sophia wiped at her eyes quickly, embarrassed by crying in front of me. I keep thinking about what you said at dinner that night. Which part? About none of it feeling real. She shook her head slowly. I hated you for leaving sometimes. I looked at her in surprise. What? Not because you failed. Because you actually walked away. Her voice cracked slightly. I never could. That hurt more than I expected because suddenly I saw my sister differently. Not as the golden child who had everything easier, but as someone who spent her whole life trapped inside expectations she never chose. You know, I said softly, you do not have to keep proving yourself to them. Sophia gave me a tired smile. Easy for you to say. You survived disappointing them. Before I could answer, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She looked down at the screen and immediately turned it face down again. Mom, I guessed. She nodded. She keeps asking what I am going to tell people. I laughed quietly in disbelief. Unbelievable. Sophia looked at me for a long moment before speaking again. I am jealous of you. Sophia. No, seriously. She sat back against the couch, staring at the city lights outside her windows. You built something real. You built your own life. Everyone always said I was the successful one, but honestly, she swallowed hard. I do not even know who I am without other people telling me who to be. For the first time in years, there was no competition between us. No family expectations hanging in the air. Just two sisters sitting quietly in a dark apartment trying to figure out how they became strangers in the first place. Then Sophia asked the question that changed everything. Do you think your company is hiring anytime soon? For a moment, I honestly thought I misunderstood her question. Sophia Carter asking me for a job felt like hearing someone describe snow in July. My little sister had spent years climbing every polished corporate ladder our parents admired while I struggled to keep my tiny agency alive. She was the successful one, the favorite, the daughter people bragged about at dinner parties. But sitting beside me on that couch, wearing old sweatpants with mascara still faintly smeared beneath her eyes, she did not look like the golden child anymore. She looked scared. You want to work for me? I asked carefully. Sophia immediately looked embarrassed. Forget it. That sounded pathetic. No, it did not. Emily, I am serious. Forget I asked. She stood up too quickly and carried her untouched coffee into the kitchen like she regretted becoming vulnerable for even 30 seconds. I followed her slowly. Sophia. She leaned against the counter with her back toward me. I do not need pity. Good, I answered. Because I was not offering any. She looked over at me then, surprised. Your resume is insane, I continued. You have years of experience managing campaigns bigger than anything Carter Creative has handled. That is corporate experience. Experience is experience. She laughed weakly. You are forgetting one thing. What? Your employees would probably think it is weird hiring your emotionally unstable sister, right after her fiancé leaves her. I crossed my arms. First of all, everybody at my company is emotionally unstable. It is advertising. That finally made her smile again. A real smile this time. Small but real. Then her expression softened. You would actually consider it? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I would. She stared at me like she did not fully believe it. Even after everything? I understood what she really meant. Not just the distance between us recently, but years of silence. Years of standing beside our parents while they criticized me. Years of never choosing sides. You are still my sister, I said quietly. That almost broke her composure again. She looked down immediately, blinking hard before speaking. I do not even know what kind of person I am anymore. Then maybe this is your chance to figure it out. We stayed there talking until almost midnight. Really talking for the first time in years. Not about appearances or careers or what our parents expected from us. Actual honest conversation. Sophia admitted she hated her corporate job long before Ethan left. She confessed she felt exhausted pretending to be perfect all the time. Every decision in her life had been built around avoiding disappointment from our parents. Northwestern. Marketing. Ethan. The luxury condo downtown. The country club wedding they had already started planning. None of it actually felt like hers anymore. Do you remember when we were kids and I wanted to study photography? She asked suddenly. I blinked. Yeah. You carried that old camera everywhere. She smiled faintly at the memory. Dad told me photographers only make money shooting weddings. I remember. So I switched to marketing because it sounded respectable. Something about the way she said respectable made both of us laugh quietly because that word basically defined our childhood. Respectable clothes, respectable friends, respectable careers, respectable relationships. Meanwhile, happiness always felt optional. The next Monday morning, Sophia walked into Carter Creative carrying a leather notebook and looking visibly nervous. I had officially hired her 3 days earlier as a brand strategist on a probationary contract because despite everything, I still believed in fairness. If she worked here, she would earn it. My team gathered near the conference area while I introduced her. Everyone, this is Sophia. She will be joining us on strategy and client development. Nobody knew we were sisters except Priya and Daniel, who accidentally learned during a meeting weeks earlier and reacted with absolute fascination. The rest of the office simply saw a polished corporate professional joining our fast-growing agency. Welcome to the chaos, joked Marcus, one of my designers. Sophia smiled politely, but I could already tell she felt out of place. Carter Creative was nothing like the corporation she came from. People brainstormed sitting on couches with coffee cups everywhere. Music played softly in the background during work sessions. Nobody cared about job titles nearly as much as ideas. By noon, Sophia already looked overwhelmed. Your Slack channels move faster than stock market trading floors, she muttered while reviewing client messages. You get used to it, I said. Eventually. She glanced toward me carefully. You are really the boss here. I laughed. That surprises you? Honestly. She lowered her voice slightly. A little. I appreciated the honesty more than fake encouragement. Throughout the week, I watched Sophia struggle with small things that corporate life never taught her. She overprepared for every meeting. She apologized constantly. She kept asking permission for tiny decisions because she was used to layers of management approval. But something interesting started happening too. Clients loved her. Beneath all the exhaustion and insecurity, Sophia was genuinely talented. She understood branding psychology deeply, and unlike many corporate executives, she actually listened when clients spoke. By Friday afternoon, my team already respected her. Then our parents found out. I should have expected it sooner. Apparently my mother ran into one of Daniel's investors at a charity luncheon, and somehow the conversation reached Carter Creative. Around 6 that evening, while Sophia and I reviewed campaign notes in the office kitchen, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and immediately tensed. Mom, she whispered. Take it, I said quietly. Sophia stepped into the hallway, but the office was small enough that I still heard parts of the conversation. Yes, Mom. Pause. No, it is temporary. Another pause. Then her face changed completely. Why does it matter what people think? I looked up immediately because Sophia never spoke to our mother like that. Silence filled the hallway for several seconds before she answered again, this time colder. No, Mom. I am not embarrassed. Another long pause. Then finally, actually, I think Emily built something real while all of us were busy performing. My chest tightened hearing that because part of me still could not believe she was finally saying these things out loud. Sophia ended the call shaking slightly. When she walked back into the kitchen, she looked emotionally drained but strangely lighter at the same time. Well, she said quietly, setting her phone down on the counter. I think I just disappointed the family. I looked at her for a second before smiling softly. Welcome to the club. Something shifted after that phone call with our mother. Not overnight and not perfectly, but enough that I started recognizing pieces of the sister I grew up with again. Sophia stopped acting like every decision required permission from invisible judges. She laughed more at the office. She stayed late brainstorming with the team instead of rushing home to maintain appearances somewhere else. Sometimes I caught her standing near the studio windows staring out at the city with this strange expression, like she was seeing her own life clearly for the first time. Carter Creative kept growing too. We landed a healthcare startup from Denver, a restaurant chain expanding across the Midwest, and a podcast network looking for a full rebrand before the new year. Most days the office felt chaotic in the best possible way. Whiteboards covered in campaign notes. Designers arguing about typography choices. Coffee cups everywhere. Music playing quietly in the background while deadlines approached faster than any of us wanted. One Friday afternoon, Marcus rolled his chair beside Sophia's desk holding campaign mock-ups. "You know," he said casually, "you are weirdly good at calming clients down." Sophia looked up from her laptop. "What does that mean?" "It means people stop panicking when you talk." Marcus shrugged. "It is a useful skill in this industry." Sophia laughed softly. "Years of managing executives with control issues." "Well, whatever it is, keep doing it." After he walked away, Sophia looked toward me across the office. "Was that a compliment?" "Do not get used to it," I answered. She threw a pen at me without smiling, but the warmth between us felt natural now instead of forced. Still, family tension continued building quietly in the background. Our parents stopped pretending to support the situation privately. My mother left increasingly passive-aggressive voicemails asking Sophia if she was still doing temporary work at my company. My father sent articles about executive openings at major corporations like he expected her to wake up and return to the version of life they approved of. Sophia ignored most of it, but I could tell it affected her more than she admitted. Then Thanksgiving arrived. The first real test. "Are you going?" Sophia asked me 3 days before the holiday while we reviewed client presentations. Honestly, I was not planning to. She nodded slowly like she expected that answer. "Mom keeps calling." "Same." Sophia closed her laptop carefully. "I think if we skip it, they will turn it into some huge dramatic thing." "It already is a huge dramatic thing." She sighed. "Probably." We ended up agreeing to go together mostly because neither of us wanted to face the family alone. The drive to our parents' house felt tense in that familiar, uncomfortable way siblings understand without discussing directly. Sophia sat in the passenger seat staring out the window while early snow fell across Chicago suburbs glowing with Christmas lights. "Do you ever think about just leaving?" she asked suddenly. "Leaving where?" "All of it." She gestured vaguely. "The expectations. The family reputation nonsense. Everything." I kept my eyes on the road. Every day. When we pulled into the driveway, expensive cars already lined the street. Extended family members filled the house with loud conversations and forced holiday cheer. The second we walked inside, every head seemed to turn toward us at once. I immediately remembered why I hated these gatherings. Family events in our house always felt like performance evaluations disguised as dinners. My mother approached first wearing a perfectly styled cream-colored sweater, and the same controlled smile she used at charity galas. "There you girls are." She hugged Sophia first, noticeably longer than me. "Some things never changed completely. You both look tired," she added while guiding us toward the dining room. "That is usually what happens when people work," I answered. My mother pretended not to hear me. Dinner started politely enough. Conversations about travel plans, housing markets, and somebody's son applying to law school filled the table. But underneath everything, tension sat there waiting. It always did. Eventually my Uncle Richard looked toward Sophia. "So how is corporate life treating you these days?" Before Sophia could answer, my mother jumped in smoothly. "Sophia is helping Emily temporarily, while she figures out her next move." I felt Sophia stiffen beside me immediately. "Actually," she said carefully, "I am not figuring out my next move. I like where I work." Silence spread across the table fast. My father lowered his wine glass slowly. "Sophia." "What?" she asked. "You are too talented to stay at a boutique agency forever." The words irritated me instantly, but before I could respond, Sophia surprised everyone again. "Carter Creative made more this quarter than my old department did last year." My father blinked. "That is not the point." "Then what is the point?" she asked quietly. The room became painfully silent. Even relatives stopped pretending not to listen anymore. My mother forced a small laugh. Nobody is criticizing Emily's little company. You literally call it little every single time you mention it, I said. Emily, my mother warned softly. No, Sophia interrupted. She is right. I looked at her in shock because I had never seen her openly challenge them in front of the family before. Not once. Sophia sat straighter in her chair now, years of bottled frustration finally pushing forward. Do you know how exhausting it is? She asked our parents. Everything with this family is about appearances. Every conversation. Every holiday. Every relationship. My father's expression hardened immediately. We sacrificed a lot to give both of you opportunities. I know, Sophia answered. And somehow you still made love feel conditional. Nobody moved after she said that. My mother looked genuinely stunned. My father stared at Sophia like he did not recognize his own daughter anymore. Somewhere near the end of the table, a fork clinked awkwardly against a plate. Then my mother quietly asked the question that revealed everything. Is this what Emily has been telling you? Sophia actually laughed at that. Not angrily. Sadly. No, Mom. This is what I finally figured out myself. The rest of dinner collapsed after that. Conversations became awkward and forced. Relatives left early pretending they had long drives home. My father barely spoke another word to either of us. But something unexpected happened when Sophia and I walked outside afterward into the freezing night air. She smiled. Not the polished smile from family photos. Not the controlled corporate smile she wore at networking events. A real one. I cannot believe I actually said all that, she whispered. I looked at her for a second before laughing quietly. Honestly? Me neither. Snowflakes landed softly in her hair while she stared back at the glowing house behind us. You know what is weird? She said. For the first time in my life, disappointing them does not feel as scary anymore. After Thanksgiving, the distance between us and our parents stopped being subtle. My mother no longer called pretending everything was normal. My father stopped sending articles about executive careers entirely. Instead, silence settled over the family like cold weather nobody wanted to acknowledge. And strangely, the silence felt healthier than the performance ever did. At Carter Creative, life kept moving forward too fast for anyone to sit comfortably inside old family drama for long. December became our busiest month since launching the agency. Clients wanted year-end campaigns finished before the holidays. New contracts arrived almost weekly. We expanded into the office next door after realizing half our team was taking meetings in hallways because conference rooms stayed full constantly. One evening, while reviewing campaign metrics with Marcus and Sophia, I caught myself watching her instead of the presentation screen. 6 months earlier, she would have apologized before speaking in meetings. Now she confidently challenged ideas, redirected strategies, and handled difficult client conversations better than anyone on staff. Even the way she dressed had changed slightly. Less polished perfection. More comfortable confidence. She looked freer somehow. You are staring, she said without looking away from her laptop. Marcus grinned immediately. Sibling telepathy. Sophia froze for half a second. I sighed. Wait. You did not know. Marcus looked between us in complete shock. Hold on. You two are sisters. The entire office erupted instantly. No way. That actually explains so much. You literally have the same eyes. Sophia covered her face laughing while I leaned back in my chair accepting defeat. We had not intentionally hidden it forever. We just never announced it. This is insane, Marcus said. Your family dinners must feel like psychological warfare. Sophia and I looked at each other for 1 second before laughing harder than we should have. That is actually pretty accurate, she admitted. The office finding out changed things in an unexpected way. Instead of awkwardness, it somehow made the team closer. People stopped seeing Sophia as the intimidating corporate strategist and started understanding why she sometimes looked emotionally exhausted after calls from our parents. One Friday evening after work, several employees stayed late decorating the office for a holiday party. Music played while people hung lights badly and argued over pizza toppings. I stood near the windows holding a box of decorations when Sophia walked beside me quietly. You know what is weird? She said. What? She looked around the office carefully. Nobody here cares about status. That surprises you? A little. She smiled faintly. At my old company, every conversation felt like networking disguised as friendship. I understood exactly what she meant because that same energy existed inside our family too. Everything transactional. Everything measured. Even affection sometimes felt earned instead of given. Before I could answer, Sophia's phone buzzed. Her expression changed immediately after seeing the screen. Mom, I guessed. She nodded slowly. She wants us at the country club Christmas dinner tomorrow. I almost laughed. From exhaustion. Of course she does. The annual Carter family Christmas dinner was one of my mother's favorite events because it gave her a chance to display our family publicly, like some carefully managed brand campaign. Wealthy families from the suburbs gathered at the country club wearing expensive clothes while pretending their lives were perfect. Usually I avoided it whenever possible. This year, though, Sophia surprised me again. I think we should go. I stared at her. Why? Because I am tired of hiding from them. The next evening, we walked into the country club together, while soft piano music played across the ballroom and wealthy couples carried wine glasses through conversations about vacation homes and investment portfolios. Christmas decorations covered everything in gold and white. My mother stood near the entrance greeting guests like a politician at a fundraiser. The second she saw us, her smile tightened noticeably. You came, she said carefully. That is usually how invitations work, I answered. Sophia nudged my arm lightly before our mother could respond. Throughout the evening, I noticed something uncomfortable. People kept approaching Sophia asking if she was doing better after the breakup, but every conversation eventually shifted toward me and Carter Creative. Someone mentioned a business article featuring our agency. Another person congratulated Sophia for joining the successful family business. I watched our parents react every single time. My father forced polite smiles, but tension sat visibly in his jaw. My mother kept redirecting conversations toward safer topics. Then near the end of the evening, everything finally cracked. A woman from the country club board approached our table smiling warmly. Richard was just telling us Emily's company might open a second office next year. My father immediately interrupted. People exaggerate success stories all the time. The comment landed harder than he intended because the table went silent instantly. Even strangers looked uncomfortable. I stared at him across the table. Excuse me. He set his wine glass down carefully. I am saying young businesses can become unstable quickly. It is important not to get carried away. My mother quietly added, Your father only worries because entrepreneurship can be risky. Something inside me finally snapped from exhaustion. Years of criticism. Years of minimizing everything I built. Years of acting like success only mattered when it fit their definition. You know what is interesting? I said calmly. You spent years treating me like a disappointment. But the second my company became successful enough for other people to respect, suddenly you wanted partial credit. My mother's expression hardened immediately. Emily, this is not the place. No, actually this is exactly the place. The ballroom around us suddenly felt quieter even though conversation still continued elsewhere. Sophia looked nervous beside me, but she did not stop me. You cared more about appearances than either of your daughters for our entire lives, I continued quietly. And honestly, I think both of us are exhausted from pretending otherwise. My father looked furious now. Do not embarrass this family publicly. That sentence hit differently after everything. Not painful anymore. Just sad. Then Sophia spoke before I could answer. Maybe the problem is that we were never a family publicly or privately, she said softly. Our mother looked genuinely hurt for the first time all evening. Sophia. No, Mom. Sophia shook her head slowly. I spent years trying to become the version of me you approved of. And none of it made me happy. Silence settled across the table again. Real silence this time. Not polite discomfort. Truth. Finally my father stood up abruptly. I am not doing this tonight. He walked away toward the bar without another word. My mother stayed seated staring down at her untouched wine glass. For a second she suddenly looked older than I remembered. Tired. Human. You both think we were terrible parents, she said quietly. Neither Sophia nor I answered immediately because the truth felt more complicated than that. No, Sophia finally whispered. I think you cared too much about what everybody else thought. My mother looked up slowly then, and for the first time in years I think she realized both her daughters had stopped needing her approval. After the Christmas dinner, nobody in the Carter family pretended things were normal anymore. And honestly, that felt like progress. For years, every uncomfortable truth in our family had been covered with polite smiles, expensive dinners, and carefully edited conversations. Now at least everything sat openly on the table where people could not ignore it. January arrived brutally cold in Chicago, but Carter Creative entered the new year stronger than ever. We officially signed the lease for a larger office space overlooking the river, and for the first time in my life, I hired employees faster than I lost sleep. Sophia became essential to the company almost without either of us noticing when it happened. Clients requested her specifically during strategy meetings. Marcus joked she had corporate survivor instincts, but the truth was simpler. Sophia understood people. Years of managing impossible expectations had made her exceptionally good at reading emotions before anyone else noticed them. One afternoon, while we prepared a presentation for a national retail client, Sophia sat cross-legged on the conference room table reviewing slides. This campaign feels dishonest, she said suddenly. I looked up from my laptop. What do you mean? The messaging. She pointed toward the screen. We are selling luxury as emotional fulfillment again. Marcus laughed from across the room. That is literally advertising. I know, Sophia answered quietly. But maybe that is part of the problem. The room went silent for a second because everybody understood she was not really talking about marketing anymore. Later that evening, after most employees left, Sophia stayed behind helping me organize materials for an investor dinner. Snow fell softly outside the office windows while the city lights reflected across the river. Do you ever think about how weird our childhood was? She asked suddenly. I leaned back in my chair. Constantly. She smiled faintly. I used to think every family practiced conversations before events. I laughed immediately. Wait, you remember that too? Mom literally made us rehearse answers before charity dinners. We both sat there laughing in disbelief because somehow those memories felt absurd now instead of normal. Remember when Dad got angry because I said I wanted to study art history? I asked. Sophia nodded instantly. He said successful people do not waste tuition on hobbies. Exactly. She stared down at the table quietly for a moment. You know what I realized recently? What? Neither of them were actually happy either. That thought stayed with me long after she said it because deep down I knew she was right. My parents spent decades chasing status, approval, and appearances so aggressively that they never seemed relaxed, even when they technically succeeded. Every friendship felt strategic. Every achievement needed public validation. Every problem became something to hide instead of solve. Then 2 weeks later, the illusion surrounding our family cracked even further. It started with my Aunt Linda calling me unexpectedly on a Sunday afternoon. I probably should not tell you this, she said immediately. That usually means you definitely should. She sighed heavily. Your father is in financial trouble. I sat upright instantly. What? According to my aunt, several investments my father made through friends at the country club had gone badly over the last few years. Really badly. Apparently he had been quietly refinancing things and borrowing money while maintaining the appearance that everything was perfectly stable. Your mother knows? I asked. Of course she knows. My aunt lowered her voice slightly. Emily, your parents have been pretending for a long time. After the call ended, I sat staring at my apartment wall feeling strangely numb. Growing up, my father always presented himself as a man completely in control. Confident. Successful. Untouchable. The idea that he had spent years secretly panicking behind that image changed something fundamental in how I saw him. That evening I told Sophia everything. She listened silently from my kitchen counter while drinking tea. Honestly, she finally said, I am not surprised. You are not. No, she looked down at her cup carefully. Do you remember how obsessed Dad became with appearances after the recession? I thought back slowly. New cars even when money seemed tight. Bigger charity donations. More expensive vacations posted online constantly. Oh my God, I whispered. Sophia nodded. I think they were terrified people would realize they were struggling. Suddenly so many childhood memories rearranged themselves differently in my head. My father criticizing my unstable career. My mother obsessing over public image. The pressure for perfection. It was never just pride. It was fear. Fear that if appearances cracked, everything underneath would collapse too. 2 days later, my mother showed up unexpectedly at the office. The entire staff froze slightly when she entered because even people who never met her immediately recognized the tension in the room. She looked elegant as always, but exhausted underneath it. "Can we talk privately?" she asked. I led her into my office while employees pretended not to listen from outside. My mother sat carefully across from me, studying the room quietly. "This office is beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you." She nodded slowly. "You built all this yourself." The sentence sounded strange coming from her because it carried actual acknowledgement instead of polite dismissal. "Why are you here?" I asked gently. She hesitated for several seconds before speaking. "Your father is struggling." I already knew that now, but hearing her admit it aloud still felt surreal. "Why did you hide it?" Her expression cracked slightly then. "Because that is what we always do." Silence filled the office. Real silence again. Honest silence. Finally my mother looked directly at me. "I know you think we cared more about appearances than our daughters." I did not interrupt because there was nothing useful to say yet. She folded her hands together tightly. "The truth is, your father grew up poor. Much poorer than either of you understand. He spent his whole life terrified of losing status because he believed people only respected success." I blinked slowly because suddenly my father's behavior made painful sense. "That does not excuse everything," she added quietly. "I know that." For the first time in my entire life, my mother looked uncertain. Instead of controlled. Human instead of polished. "We pushed both of you too hard," she admitted. "And somewhere along the way, we forgot how to simply love you without conditions attached." Hearing those words from her felt strangely emotional because part of me had stopped believing they would ever exist at all. Then she looked around my office one more time before standing carefully. "For what it is worth," she said softly, "I think your sister became happier after working here." I swallowed hard but stayed quiet. My mother gave me a tired smile that looked smaller and more real than any expression I remembered from childhood. Maybe both my daughters were stronger than I realized. Then she walked out of the office alone while snow continued falling quietly outside the windows. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that family is never as perfect as it looks, do not forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below telling us your thoughts. And if you love emotional family stories filled with real struggles, healing, and powerful life lessons, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Spring arrived slowly in Chicago, carrying that strange mix of cold wind and cautious optimism the city always seemed to wear after winter. Carter Creative expanded again, this time beyond anything I imagined possible when I first started answering emails from my tiny apartment kitchen. We now had clients across multiple states, a waiting list for consultations, and a team large enough that I occasionally forgot everyone's coffee orders. Some mornings I walked into the office and still felt surreal seeing my name on the glass entrance doors. Carter Creative. Something that used to embarrass my family had somehow become real enough for the rest of the world to respect. Sophia thrived alongside me in ways neither of us expected. She stopped introducing herself through job titles or relationships. She started taking photography classes at night again, something she quietly admitted she had wanted for years. Sometimes she even carried an old camera through downtown. After work taking pictures of random city moments most people ignored. Street musicians near train stations. Rain reflecting against skyscrapers. Elderly couples holding hands outside diners. Real life instead of curated perfection. One Friday afternoon, Marcus pinned a printed article onto the office bulletin board dramatically. "Everybody look important," he announced. "We officially made business media." The article featured a photo of me and Sophia standing in the office beside the headline, "Chicago Sisters Redefining Modern Branding Through Emotional Authenticity." Sophia groaned immediately. That headline sounds aggressively inspirational. But she still smiled while reading it. Then near the bottom of the article, One sentence caught my attention. Carter Creative recently received the Midwest Emerging Business Excellence Award and will speak at next month's Regional Innovation Conference. I stared at the sentence twice because somehow the award still did not feel real. Emily, Marcus said loudly, you are officially conference speaking successful now. The entire office applauded dramatically, while I covered my face in embarrassment. Later that evening after everyone left, Sophia leaned against my office doorway holding 2 coffees. You nervous about the conference? She asked. Terrified. She laughed softly and handed me a cup. Good. Means you still care. The conference took place 3 weeks later at a luxury hotel downtown overlooking Lake Michigan. Hundreds of entrepreneurs, investors, and executives filled the ballroom wearing expensive suits and carrying polished confidence. 5 years earlier, I would have walked into a room like that feeling completely invisible. Now people recognized me before introductions even happened. It still felt strange every single time. Backstage before the awards ceremony, I adjusted my blazer nervously while staring at my speech notes for probably the 100th time. Sophia sat nearby scrolling through her phone calmly. You know, she said without looking up, you are the only person I know who writes keynote speeches like hostage negotiation plans. That is because public speaking is psychological warfare. She laughed quietly. Then her expression shifted slightly. Mom and Dad are here. I froze. What? I just saw them near the front tables. For a second, old anxiety rushed back instinctively. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because part of me still remembered how painful disappointment used to feel. Sophia noticed immediately. Hey. I looked over at her. You do not owe anybody perfection tonight. That sentence settled something inside me. A few minutes later, the ceremony began. Business leaders gave speeches full of predictable phrases about innovation and growth while giant screens displayed company logos behind them. Then finally my category arrived. This year's Emerging Business Excellence Award goes to... The presenter smiled dramatically. Carter Creative. Applause exploded across the ballroom while my entire team stood cheering loudly near the middle tables. Marcus actually whistled like we had won a championship game. I laughed despite myself and walked toward the stage feeling strangely calm now. The ballroom lights looked blinding from up there. Hundreds of faces stared back at me. Investors, executives, journalists, and near the front table my parents. My father looked older than I remembered recently. Less untouchable. My mother sat beside him holding a polite smile that no longer looked quite as practiced. Sophia gave me a small nod from her table. I stepped toward the microphone holding the award carefully while the room quieted. Thank you, I began. Honestly, when I started my company from a tiny apartment in Chicago, I did not exactly picture this moment happening. Light laughter moved through the audience. I glanced down briefly at my prepared speech in my hand. Then I folded the papers closed instead, because suddenly I did not want to sound polished anymore. I wanted to sound honest. A lot of people think business success starts with confidence, I continued. But sometimes it actually starts with rejection. The room stayed completely silent now. Sometimes success begins the moment you stop building your life around other people's expectations. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sophia watching me carefully. I spent years believing achievement meant becoming impressive enough to earn approval, I said quietly. More money, better titles, safer choices, the right image. My voice softened slightly, but eventually I realized something. Success means absolutely nothing if the people around you only love the version of you that looks good to strangers. Complete silence filled the ballroom. Not uncomfortable silence. Listening silence. Real silence. I looked toward my parents then for just a second. My father stared down at the table quietly while my mother's eyes looked suspiciously emotional. The best thing that ever happened to me, I continued, was failing to become the person everybody expected. Then I smiled slightly toward Sophia, because it gave me the chance to become someone honest instead. Applause started slowly at first, then spread across the ballroom louder and louder until people stood. Real standing ovation loud. My chest tightened unexpectedly because suddenly I realized something important. This moment did not feel satisfying because strangers admired me. It felt satisfying because for the first time in my life, I was standing publicly without pretending to be anyone else. After the ceremony ended, people crowded around offering congratulations while cameras flashed and business cards exchanged hands everywhere. Somewhere inside the chaos, I finally saw my parents approaching slowly together. My mother spoke first. "Your speech was beautiful." I nodded carefully. "Thank you." My father stayed quiet for a moment before finally saying the words I never expected from him. "I was wrong about your company." The sentence sounded painfully difficult for him, like admitting it required dismantling years of pride internally. I looked at him for several seconds before answering honestly. "It was never really about the company." He lowered his eyes slightly because both of us understood exactly what I meant. Then Sophia walked beside me carrying 2 champagne glasses and casually handed one over. "Well," she said lightly, looking between all of us, "this is emotionally uncomfortable." Somehow that broke the tension instantly. Even my father laughed once under his breath. Small, awkward, human. And standing there together beneath ballroom lights and expensive decorations, I realized our family still was not perfect. Maybe it never would be. But for the first time, at least nobody was pretending anymore. The weeks after the conference felt strangely lighter, like years of tension inside our family had finally cracked enough to let actual air in. Not perfect air. Not magical reconciliation movie air. Just honesty. And honestly, that was already more than I ever expected from the Carters. My parents started reaching out more carefully after the awards ceremony. Not dramatically. Not emotionally overflowing with apologies. That would have felt fake coming from them anyway. Instead, small things changed. My father called one afternoon asking if I wanted lunch downtown. My first instinct was suspicion because historically our conversations revolved around criticism disguised as concern. But I agreed anyway. We met at a quiet steakhouse near his office on a rainy Tuesday. For the first 15 minutes, conversation stayed painfully polite. Weather, traffic, business growth. Then finally my father set down his coffee and sighed heavily. "I am not very good at this part," he admitted. "What part?" "Talking without sounding like I am managing a board meeting." I almost laughed because it was probably the most self-aware thing I had ever heard him say. He rubbed one hand across his face slowly. "My father used to tell me that respect was the only thing keeping poor people safe." I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "When I was growing up, people treated you differently if they thought you were struggling." He looked down toward the table. "I promised myself my family would never experience that." Suddenly his obsession with appearances, success, and stability felt less like arrogance, and more like survival instincts stretched too far. "Dad," I said carefully, "I understand why you wanted security for us." He nodded faintly. "But I confused security with control." That sentence stayed with me the rest of the day because it explained almost everything about our family. My parents did love us. They just loved us through fear instead of trust. Meanwhile, Sophia kept changing too. Not dramatically overnight, but steadily. Quietly. She moved out of the luxury condo downtown into a smaller apartment closer to the office because, according to her, she was tired of living inside a furniture showroom. She decorated the new place herself using mismatched vintage furniture and framed photographs she had taken around the city. The apartment felt warm in a way none of our childhood homes ever really did. One Saturday afternoon, I helped her carry boxes upstairs while music played softly from her kitchen. "You know," I said looking around, "this is the first apartment you have ever lived in that actually feels like you." Sophia smiled while opening another box. "That is because nobody else designed it." We spent the afternoon unpacking dishes and laughing at old childhood memories that somehow felt less painful now. At one point, Sophia pulled out a small framed photograph from a box labeled office. It showed us as little girls sitting on a dock during some summer vacation in Michigan. I could not remember who took it. We both looked genuinely happy in a way children only do before they realize love can become conditional. "I forgot this existed," she whispered. I stared at the picture quietly. "We used to be close." "We still are," she answered softly. That night, after helping her finish unpacking, we walked through downtown Chicago together carrying coffee while summer crowds filled the streets. "Do you ever regret leaving corporate life?" I asked. Sophia thought about it seriously before answering. "Honestly, Sometimes I miss the certainty. What do you mean? Corporate life tells you exactly how to succeed. Work hard. Dress correctly. Say the right things. Climb higher. She looked around the city lights thoughtfully. Real life is messy, eh? Yeah, I admitted. It is. She smiled slightly. But it also feels more honest. Back at Carter Creative, the company culture evolved into something I secretly always wanted growing up but never experienced. Employees stayed after work talking about actual life instead of networking opportunities. People celebrated each other without competition hiding underneath compliments. Nobody cared what neighborhood someone lived in or how expensive their clothes looked. One evening Marcus looked around during a chaotic brainstorming session and laughed. This office feels weirdly emotionally healthy. That sounds fake, Sophia answered immediately. No, seriously, Marcus insisted. Most workplaces feel like survival games. I understood exactly what he meant because my entire childhood felt like one too. Then late in August, something unexpected happened. My mother invited Sophia and me to dinner at the house without extended family, country club guests, or social obligations attached. Just us. The four of us sat around the dining room table eating takeout instead of catered food for maybe the first time in our lives. No fancy presentation. No performance. Just regular conversation. At one point my mother admitted she started seeing a therapist after Christmas. Sophia nearly dropped her fork. Wait. Seriously? My mother laughed awkwardly. Apparently suppressing emotions for 30 years is not considered healthy. Even my father smiled at that. Then later in the evening, while clearing dishes in the kitchen, my mother quietly stopped beside me. I owe you an apology, she said. I looked at her carefully. For what? Her expression tightened slightly. For making you feel like love had to be earned through achievement. The sentence hit me harder than expected because part of me had waited years to hear something like that while another part stopped believing it would ever happen. You were always easier to understand when you succeeded publicly, she admitted softly. I did not realize how much pressure that put on both of you. I leaned against the kitchen counter quietly for a second. We spent most of our lives trying not to disappoint you. My mother's eyes filled slightly then. I know. No dramatic crying followed. No perfect emotional movie scene. Just two women standing in a quiet kitchen finally acknowledging damage that existed for years. And honestly, that felt more real than any polished apology ever could. Later that night, after dinner ended, Sophia and I stood outside near the driveway while warm summer air moved through the trees. The house behind us glowed softly through the windows. Do you think we are actually becoming normal? Sophia asked jokingly. I laughed quietly. Absolutely not. Fair. She looked back toward the house thoughtfully. But maybe we are becoming honest. I nodded slowly because for the first time in my life, our family no longer felt like a brand people were protecting. It finally felt like actual people learning how to exist without pretending all the time. And somehow, that mattered more than perfection ever did. Almost 2 years after the night my father told me I was ruining the family image, I stood in the middle of Carter Creative's new headquarters watching employees carry boxes into conference rooms with names Sophia helped design. The office occupied an entire floor now. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago River, sunlight reflected across polished concrete floors, and our logo stretched across the entrance wall in brushed steel letters that still felt surreal every time I saw them. Somewhere in the background, Marcus argued dramatically with the design team about office plants while music played through hidden speakers. The space felt alive. Real. Built instead of inherited. You are doing the staring thing again, Sophia said from beside me holding 2 iced coffees. What staring thing? The emotionally overwhelmed founder thing. I laughed quietly and accepted the coffee. I still cannot believe this place exists. You created it, she reminded me. That usually helps things exist. Her voice sounded lighter these days. Freer. Over the past 2 years, my sister changed in ways nobody in our family could have predicted. She stopped measuring herself through achievements people could display publicly. She traveled alone for the first time. She turned one wall inside her apartment into a photography gallery filled with moments she captured around the city. And most importantly, she stopped apologizing for wanting a different kind of life than the one our parents planned for her. Carter Creative changed both of us in different ways. For me, the company proved I could survive rejection without losing myself. For Sophia, it became the first place where nobody expected her to perform perfection before deserving respect. Around noon, the office buzzed with excitement because we were preparing for our biggest event yet, the launch celebration for a national campaign that would officially push Carter Creative into international markets. Investors, media executives, and clients would attend that evening. 2 years ago, an event like this would have terrified me. Now it mostly felt exhausting in a manageable way. "Mom texted," Sophia said while checking her phone. "That sentence still sounds dangerous." She smirked. "Apparently they are arriving early to help." I nearly dropped my coffee. Help with what? I do not know. Emotional support through unnecessary organization maybe. An hour later, our parents walked through the office doors carrying bakery boxes and looking strangely nervous, like they still were not fully sure how to exist inside our world naturally. But they tried. That was the difference now. They actually tried. My mother immediately started arranging desserts on catering tables while pretending she was not impressed by the office. My father walked slowly through the space studying campaign displays mounted along the walls. At one point, he stopped near a framed photo showing the original Carter Creative logo I designed years earlier inside my tiny apartment. "You kept this?" he asked quietly. "Of course." He nodded slowly without looking away from the frame. I remember thinking that logo looked unprofessional. I laughed softly. "You also thought my company would collapse in 6 months." "That too." For a second we both stood there smiling awkwardly before he surprised me again. "I am glad I was wrong." Hearing that still felt strange coming from him because my father used to treat vulnerability like weakness. But over the last 2 years he changed too. Not perfectly. He still cared too much about appearances sometimes. He still defaulted toward control whenever life felt uncertain. But now he noticed those patterns instead of defending them automatically. Therapy helped according to my mother, although he referred to therapy exclusively as that communication guy. By evening, the office filled with guests carrying champagne glasses and business cards, while conversations echoed through the open space. Cameras flashed near campaign displays. Investors discussed expansion opportunities. Somewhere near the windows, Marcus passionately explained typography choices to someone who clearly regretted asking. I stood near the center of the room watching everything unfold when Sophia stepped beside me quietly. "Remember your old apartment?" she asked suddenly. "Unfortunately. You used to cry over client invoices at that tiny kitchen table. Thank you for bringing that memory into this beautiful evening." She laughed. "I am serious. Look at this now." I looked around slowly. Employees smiling near the rooftop entrance. Clients genuinely excited about our work. My parents speaking comfortably with people they once would have desperately tried to impress. It all felt strangely peaceful. "You know what is funny?" Sophia continued softly. "The family image everyone cared so much about?" "Yeah." She smiled slightly. "It only became real after we stopped trying to protect it." Before I could answer, Marcus suddenly appeared holding a microphone dramatically. "Attention emotionally unavailable professionals," he announced loudly. The room laughed immediately. "Our founders are required to say inspirational things now." Sophia groaned beside me. "I hate him." "No, you do not." Marcus handed me the microphone while guests applauded politely. I looked around the office for a second before speaking. 2 years ago, this company was one stressed woman with a laptop and terrible plumbing. Laughter spread across the room. And honestly, I thought success meant proving people wrong. I glanced briefly toward my parents and then Sophia. But somewhere along the way, I realized success is not about becoming impressive enough for approval. The room quieted naturally. It is about building a life where you do not need to pretend anymore. I saw my mother lower her eyes slightly while listening. My father stood quietly beside her with one hand in his pocket, no longer looking like a man trying to control every room he entered. Just a father listening to his daughter honestly. "This company exists because a lot of people here stopped choosing appearances over truth," I continued. "And I think that matters more than any award or headline ever will." Sophia smiled beside me while guests applauded warmly across the office. Through the giant windows behind them, The Chicago skyline glowed against the darkening evening sky. For years, I thought success would finally make me worthy in my family's eyes. But standing there surrounded by people no longer pretending to be perfect, I finally understood something much simpler. The moment our family stopped performing for the world was the moment we finally became one. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that family is never as perfect as it looks, do not forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below telling us your thoughts. And if you love emotional family stories filled with real struggles, healing, and powerful life lessons, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.